In the numbing cold, Joe Stiley does his best to help two other passengers, Nikki Felch and Priscilla Tirado.
I had Priscilla in a kind of an arm lock on this side, and I had Nikki on this side, but this arm wasn't working very well. And the helicopter began to pull us away into the water. I lost Nikki almost instantly because this whole arm just was dysfunctional. And I had Priscilla under that arm for about halfway across the river, and we started running into the broken ice. And I was coming up into those ice packs, one pack after another, and all my ribs ended up being broken. At some point during that, I lost my grip on Priscilla and left her laying there on top of a block of ice.
Joe is pulled to safety, but Priscilla Tirado is now stranded and alone. The helicopter drops Priscilla a life ring.
I watched her be towed off. I saw her lose her grip on the lifeline.
That's when it hit me that this woman was going to drown in front of me. She was in the open water, and she's being pushed under the water by the helicopter wash.
Then one bystander decides to take action.
He didn't think about how cold the water was, didn't think what it would do to him.
It's a federal government employee named Lenny Skutnik.
He really was a hero in that he had enough guts to do it and just didn't think about the consequences.
Lenny reacted. Nobody else did. They were probably all standing around. I wanted to react, but I couldn't.
Skutnik's bravery saves Priscilla's life, but her husband and baby are among the dead.
And the paramedic reaches out and grabs Nikki Felch, and he just grabs a hold of her, hoists her up onto the skid the best he can. And he's not even secured into the helicopter. He's basically balancing himself, so it's pretty amazing.
It's now been 45 minutes since Flight 90 plunged into the icy river. Too long for anyone to survive in the freezing water.
Nikki Felch was the last one to be pulled out of the water.
Only 5 people make it out alive. Within hours, NTSB investigators are on the job. Flight 90 has crashed a little more than a kilometer from the runway. The location tells investigators the plane didn't gain much altitude, but little else.
All we knew was that it seemed to have hit in a flat attitude, which would indicate some problem of control, but we didn't know what exactly caused it.
Yeah.
At the airport, they gather as much information as they can.
It's quite a day, snowing pretty hard at times.
About how the weather affected the flight.
So we were closed for about an hour and a quarter while they cleared the snow off the runway.
The first thing you look at is the weather. Environmental conditions are always one of the prime considerations when looking at initial causes of any accident.
Investigators learned that Flight 90 was delayed for more than an hour while the airport was closed. If ice and snow built up on Flight 90's wings during the delay, it could have prevented the plane from climbing. Ice and snow can interrupt the flow of air over the plane's wings, decreasing lift.
The importance of de-icing the aircraft is very paramount. Even a small amount of contamination can affect the performance of a wing, whether it's a light aircraft or a heavy aircraft.
They examined de-icing records from the day of the crash.
They were very, very interested in how efficient that de-icing had been.
Air Florida's procedures called for a powerful de-icing solution, one designed for very cold days.
Basically what happens is that the de-icing fluid dissolves the snow and ice sort of into a mixture. So when it's first put on at sort of full strength, it's doing quite a good job.
Records reveal that the de-icing fluid sprayed on Flight 90 was not full strength.
They homed in on the issue of the equipment itself, the mixture that was used, the procedures that were followed.
De-icing fluid has to be adjusted according to the outside temperature.
It's just de-icing fluid.
If the mixture wasn't strong enough, it might have allowed ice to reform on the wings.
Want to pass me that weather data, please?
Investigators study temperatures recorded at the airport during the long shutdown. They find that the fluid used should have worked.
They figured they'd go right behind.
Though it wasn't full strength, the mixture was strong enough for the temperatures recorded on the day of the crash.
It's sloppy work, but it shouldn't have caused the crash.
Other aircraft did depart, which means that things were successful in other jetways. What was wrong with this particular aircraft that caused a crash?
Investigators need hard evidence to figure out what brought down Air Florida Flight 90. But most of it is still underwater.
In this case, the wreckage was in the river. And the river was a murky one. It was a frozen one. Consequently, the recovery was extremely difficult. The tail came up, other pieces came up, but it's an exhausting process. Engines are knocked loose from the aircraft, and parts are here and there and scattered. So it's quite difficult to put everything together.
A week after the crash, investigators get a break. Flight 90's black box flight recorders have been recovered from the bottom of the river, and they appear to be undamaged. In 1982, the Flight Data Recorder, or FDR, captures only a handful of parameters about the performance of the plane. But it's enough to give NTSB investigator John McAdle a vital clue.
Let me know when that's ready.
It told us the altitude and the time, and so you knew how long it rolled down the runway before it lifted off.
Flight 90 takes 45 seconds to get airborne, 15 seconds longer than usual.
The takeoff was very slow.
That don't seem right, does it?
It took a long time to accelerate.
It's got to be something about their engine power.
The plane eventually had enough power to reach liftoff speed.
B1?
But it did not have enough power to climb.
It didn't climb in a normal way. So obviously, there was something wrong with the amount of the power.
It's an intriguing clue, but the FDR doesn't have enough information to reveal what the problem was.
The recorder doesn't tell you anything about the engines, or what their RPM is, or what they're doing.
McAdle hopes the cockpit voice recorder will provide some answers. The pilots of Flight 90 comment on the wintry conditions as they taxi in line behind a DC-9.
It's been a while since we were de-iced.
Tell you what, my windshield will be de-iced. Don't know about my wing.
McAdle listens as Wheaton and Pettit discuss removing ice from their plane's wings.
Oh, all we really need is the inside of the wings anyway. The wingtips are gonna shuck all that other stuff.
They know that returning to the gate to be de-iced again would mean another long delay.
If you have to leave the line, you're going to come back and have to rejoin a big line of aircraft waiting departure. So that's one of the issues that weighs on a captain's decision as to whether to depart the line up or not.
Gonna get your wing now.
It seems the captain comes up with an unconventional strategy to de-ice without losing his place in line. He maneuvers his plane into the exhaust streaming from the DC-9 in front of them.
They pulled up in back of another aircraft, a DC-9, thinking that they might be able to warm up and blow off their aircraft.
The DC-9's engines expel 100 kilometer an hour of 300-degree heat.
Did they get yours? Can you see your wingtip? I got a little bit on mine. A little? This wing's got about 1/4 to 1/2 inch on it. All the way.
It's a disturbing conversation. One that suggests these pilots were experimenting with an unofficial procedure. But so far, McAdoo has heard nothing that explains a loss of engine power.
Your throttles? Okay.
Then he hears something chilling.
Oh. God, look at that thing.
While the plane is speeding down the runway, the first officer tells the captain that he suspects there's a problem.
That don't seem right.
Does it? Yes, it is. There's 80.
But the captain convinces him nothing is wrong.
Huh? Maybe it is right.
I think he felt that they weren't accelerating very quickly. You can feel acceleration in your back, you know, when you're an experienced pilot, you know, you've done this 1,000 times. You know, if you're not moving as quickly as, you know, it's really a feel thing. Something's not right.
He should have trusted his instincts. Yeah, let me hear.
Investigators wonder if the pilots made any other mistakes.
Palm 90, taxi to position and be ready for an immediate takeoff.
I think we might get to go here in a minute. Ought to get to work.
The amount of power or thrust needed for takeoff is different for every flight. It has to be adjusted for the weight of the plane, the length of the runway, and the weather conditions.
Stabilizer trim set at 5.3. Set.
Investigators hear the first officer set a target or bug to remind him what that amount is.
EPR all the way to 204. Set.
Perhaps the first officer set his target too low for the plane's takeoff weight. If he did, it could explain why the plane gained speed so slowly.
V1.
And why it didn't have enough power to climb.
The engines could have been running, but not with enough power or thrust to maintain the airspeed required to get the lift that you needed to stay off the ground.
The weight of the plane was recorded before the flight. Investigators use this to calculate how much power Flight 90 needed to get safely off the ground.
Everything checks out. They weren't overweight. Come on, I've got an idea.
With little data from the FDR, McAdoo comes up with an unusual way to analyze the power coming from Flight 90's engines.
I don't recall it ever being used in any other accident or available for any other accident.
He hopes to figure out how much power the engines were providing by analyzing the sound they made. Jet engines contain turbines that make different sounds depending how quickly they're spinning. When the engine needs more power, the turbine spins faster, and the frequency of the sound changes.
You ready to go? Yeah.
The sound of Flight 90's engines should tell McAdoo how much power they were generating. And thanks to the unique design of the 737, with its engines mounted close to the cockpit, he already has a recording of the sound he needs.
It's unique in that the sound of the engines is recorded in the background on the cockpit voice recorder.
They play back the cockpit voice recorder in a soundproof room.
120. V1.
We did a digital sound analysis of the cockpit voice recorder, which can eliminate all other noises except that frequency of the